You're watching Straight Talk Africa. I'm Haydé Adams. Hello and welcome.
Trust me, it will boost the economy. It will help Ghana. It will put Ghana on the map.
It's good to build our country, to build fields. For now, we can't.
This week, we'll look at what it would take to bring the Summer Olympic Games to Africa. The Olympics is known for deepening a sense of national pride, but does it make economic sense? Also, unfiltered and in his own words, Tokyo Olympic silver medalist Abdi Nageeye on the incredible moment of sportsmanship that went viral. The Somali-born runner tells me why he took a risk for his competitor and why he would do it again. We'll have major sporting moments, analysis, and your opinion. Straight Talk Africa starts now. It's an ancient tradition that's become a modern spectacle. The Olympic Games is famed for merging sport, national pride, and big business. Since its inception, the Summer Olympics has been hosted on 5 continents, but never Africa. Now Senegal is preparing to host the 2026 Youth Olympics. Could this be the ultimate test run for an African nation to host the world's greatest sporting competition? Mariama Diallo takes a look.
African athletes brought home gold, silver and bronze medals from the delayed 2020 Tokyo Games. In Kenya, thousands cheered Eliud Kipchoge, who won the men's marathon. But one fan had a special request.
We are very happy, all of us from Rift Valley and Kenyans as a whole, just to implore our leaders to address the issue of stadiums like the Kipchoge Stadium is dilapidated, and today Kipchoge has shown the world that we are more than capable.
For many countries, it's just too expensive, says Andrew Zimbalist, editor of Rio 2016, Olympic Myths, Hard Realities.
So you might read, for instance, that in Tokyo this year they spent roughly $15 billion, or that in Brazil in Rio in 2016 they spent roughly $12 or $13 billion. But the real numbers in Tokyo are above $35 billion. The real number in Rio is above $20 billion.
Zimbalist says developing countries face even more cost.
They don't have the necessary transportation and communications and security and hospitality infrastructure. So the amount of money they have to invest to do it is much, much larger. And the problem is that more often than not, you're constructing infrastructure for the purpose of hosting the games, not for the purpose of solving development bottlenecks in your country.
For now, Senegal is preparing to host the first Youth Olympic Games in 2026. Experts say that event requires about 1/3 of the investment needed for the Olympic Games.
There are expectations from the whole African continent, and Senegal has to organize games that would live up to the standards of previous Youth Olympics. And because of that, Senegal is going to make sure it's a success.
Wad says plans are well underway.
We are planning to first renovate 3 main venues. The Iba Mar Diop Stadium, which will host track, rugby and other sports, and there's also our Olympic pool, which needs to be renovated. It has an adjacent park, which will host a few events such as the BMX freestyle, basketball 3-on-3 and hockey games. And there is also the Kassun Samba Dieri Diallo, where the equestrian-related events will take place.
He also says there will be venues in other hubs outside the capital Dakar, such as a popular seaside resort area, and in Diamniadio, where last year President Macky Sall led the groundbreaking of a new 50,000-seat stadium. Sall said this new stadium could be used for future local and international competitions. Mariama Diallo, WEWE News.
Mariama Diallo, thank you very much. We hit the streets of Nairobi, Kenya, to ask people there if they'd like to see the Olympic Games on home soil and if they think their country would benefit from hosting the Olympics.
We are very far from holding Olympics. First, we have no facilities. We have no playgrounds. We have so many things. We have a long way to go. So it's good to build our country, to build fields. For now, we can't. We cannot.
I don't think Kenya is ready yet to host Olympics. First of all, we do not have enough resources as a country and enough space, because at a particular time, like right now, we have a lot of economic baggages that we cannot have time and resources to host Olympics as compared to other countries like Tokyo. You see, the technology is advanced, but as for now, as Kenya, we are in a third world country. We are still developing bit by bit, so I don't think right now we are able.
I think Kenya, if we can host the Olympics, I think we can benefit because of resources. If this is part of the resources which we are using from for the children, I think we will be having a lot of challenge. So the best things to do is they build up resources, and then so we can be able to host the Olympics.
Okay, now we know how people feel. Well, France is set to host the 2024 Olympics, and it has already put the world on notice that Paris will be doing it on the cheap with a budget of just over $8.6 billion. Now, that's compared to the Tokyo Olympics, which is already on track to be the most expensive games in history, with more than $20 billion in spending. And while hosting the Olympics can often showcase a host nation's qualities, it can also expose that country's weaknesses. What can African nations learn from the expensive experiences of former host countries? I asked my guests to help us understand what exactly it would take to bring the Summer Olympics to Africa. And joining me are Mwamoyo Hamza, acting managing editor of VOA's Africa News division here in Washington, D.C., as well as Paul Frimpong, an economic and investment analyst, and he joins us from Ghana's capital of Accra. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Hamza, I'm going to start with you for some commentary. The Tokyo Olympics now officially behind us. African nations are celebrating the victories, the medals, and the absolutely great performances and sacrifices that their athletes have made in the midst of a pandemic, no less. How do you think Africa's athletes did this time compared to past games, and what were the real standout moments for you?
Well, not as good as Rio 2016 overall, where Africa finished with a total of 45 medals, 10 gold. In Tokyo, Africa finished with a total of 28 medals, but they had 11 gold medals, one more than Rio 2016. So with 10 medals total, Kenya was the top-ranked country at number 25 out of 86 countries, and Kenya was also the top-ranked African country in Rio. But the majority of the medals were bagged from the traditionally strong African sports, athletics or track and field, as they call it. The rest were in boxing, taekwondo, wrestling, and swimming. You will see that Africa suffers from the fact that it doesn't participate in a lot of sporting events during the Olympics. There are more than 40 different sports in the Olympics, and Africa participates in less than half of those. What's wild is that out of those 40 sports, Africa's real chances of winning medals are always in about only 3 sports: athletics, track and field again, boxing, and for the last time, the past 2 Olympics or so, I think Africa added swimming with the participation of Zimbabwe and South Africa. So you can see the chances for Africa winning many medals is reduced to just a few sports. And that's the reason why they don't do as well as they could have if they were participating, say, in all those 40 different sports.
And Paul, is it time that Africa as a continent moves beyond Olympic Games competitor status to host status? If you look at Brazil, the first South American country to host the 2016 Summer Olympics, their final price tag was north of $20 billion. Now, from a purely economic standpoint, Is that the kind of money you see an African nation setting aside for a sporting spectacle like this? I mean, would that even be smart? Walk us through what it would take for the Games to come to Africa.
Well, I think hosting an Olympic Games, it's no child's play. If you look at the sheer size and scale of the kind of commitment that host cities or countries have to put in place to be able to deliver an Olympic Games that is better than the previously held one, which is obviously what the IOC will be looking at, because obviously once we have Tokyo 2020, you will want to see Beijing 2022 to be better than what we experienced in Tokyo. And that comes at a very huge level of commitment on both sides. Now, there's a particular reason, which in some cases are obvious, why after 125 years or so, no, we've not had any host city from Africa to host the Olympics. Like I said, this is pretty much obvious because of the level of commitment that you have to be able to host an Olympic Games. The criteria that has been set by the IOC to select a host city, in fact, to go through the bidding process alone, is in itself rigorous. And after that, you need to also, cough out the financial commitment that is needed to be able to host the Games. So from where I sit, it's purely about a case of cost-benefit analysis, that if I'm willing to commit this amount of investment into hosting the Games, what would I stand to benefit out of it economically? Of course, there's the social and political side, which I'll come to in later stage. So when you look on the surface of it and look at the economic construct of most economists in Africa, including the leading economies on the continent, which of course might have a bit of similarities with Brazil. We talk about even the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, we have South Africa as part of it. When you go to the north of the continent, you have Egypt, Morocco, and Algeria, also relatively stronger economies. Come to East Africa, you have Kenya, you might have Ethiopia in there, you have Ghana itself, and then of course, South Africa almost always ahead in terms of everything that you need to have. Now, the cost of involving yourself in the Olympics and to be able to host the Olympics, it's very enormous. Now, even Brazil, which hosted the 2016, fell short. There was a loss of about $2 billion or so that the country has to cough up. And following the Olympics, we saw riots in Rio de Janeiro and other parts of Brazil, people agitating for due to economic hardship. So really, for me, when you look at economic cost-benefit analysis of hosting Olympics, in the context of Africa, it's not outrightly going to be about the commitment that a host city wants to make to be able to host the Olympics. Because when you look at the roadmap of hosting Olympic Games, you get about 7 to 10 years space to be able to invest in the infrastructure and operational costs that are going to be involved in hosting Olympics. But then you need to have the basic, obviously, because you look at most of the cities that have hosted Olympics in the past, you're going to have countries or cities that already have the basic infrastructure already fixed. So all they do is they refurbish or rehabilitate these infrastructures and then also add new investment to cater for the new sports and the scale of which the Olympics is going to. But currently, when you look at the continent of Africa and major cities, the basic infrastructure that are needed to be able to say this host city or this proposed city can host the Olympics, it's not something that you can really pinpoint. So it's a tough sell for me when it comes to whether the continent is ready now to host an Olympics. The scale of it, the sheer investment that is required from the physical infrastructure, the general infrastructure, the sports-driven infrastructure that you have to put in place, the externalities like security, like healthcare, all of these have to be properly structured in cities in Africa. Then when you bid and you win, you can then reinvest or invest additional infrastructure to be able to help you host an Olympic Games. And the numbers that I've seen so far, including the one that Tokyo, 2020, shows that it's going to take a lot of commitment to be able to host Olympics. And so far, on the face of the numbers, in terms of the amount of investment needed to go into Olympic preparation, to hosting it, compared to what accrues out of it, it's a bit difficult to sell at this moment for Africa.
Yeah, let me say something. We have to realize that after the 1976 Montreal Games, people started looking at the economics of hosting the games, because Montreal found itself with empty structures with no real plans what to do with them. So the cost is on both ends, going in and after. The 1980 Games were held in Moscow, and it was hard to figure out the cost. But the following games in Los Angeles, US, 1984, were the first games organized as a business enterprise. And this was led by the chairman of the Olympic Organizing Committee of Los Angeles, a gentleman by the name of Peter Uberov. That's when the games became a business. So from then on, anytime you want to host the Olympic Games, you really have to have a business plan and approach it as a business, because there's a lot of cost going in. You have to construct fresh venues, leave alone the main stadium for the opening and closing ceremony and where track and field takes place. You have to construct swimming pools. You have to construct cycling rinks. You have to construct venues for 40 games. And that's a lot of money. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, after the games, what am I going to do with all these venues? Yeah. What benefit cost do I have with all these venues? Look at South Africa when they hosted 2010 World Cup. They had to construct, a lot of stadiums. I can't remember the number really, but that's only one sport. Now with the Olympics, it's more than 40 sports events. Yes. So that's why it becomes so much expensive. And as Paul says, South Africa appears to be the most likely, candidate if they want to go for it. And then you have countries such as Morocco, which they have hosted some other continental-wide, games. But really, there has to be a very serious examination of, can we afford it? And can we afford it before? And can we afford it after the games?
And to your point, Hamza, I covered South Africa's preparations for the 2010 FIFA World Cup. And it was really nerve-wracking to watch in a country, and in my home city where so many people are living in poverty. We were building stadiums instead of more houses for people. We were building a rapid transit system which worked like clockwork if you were a tourist in the fancy parts of town, and not really where people really need adequate and functional public transport networks the most. It's now been, more than a decade, and I'm not sure many South Africans can actually point to any massive economic success to show for all that construction. People are often sold the economic benefits, but can the Olympics actually be destructive to economies?
Yes, indeed. And I think we've seen clear cases of this economic disruption. Of course, following the Athens Games, we saw Greece plunged into chaos economically. And these were as a result of the aftermath of the games that were held in Athens. So obviously, if the economic construct of the country that wants to host the games is not solid enough, the aftermath is almost always catastrophic. And as Hamza mentioned, so it's pre-games, during games, and post-games. So when you pick a typical country in Africa and look at the number of games that are being held at the Olympics, and the size or the number that African countries actually participate in, you realize that post games, we will virtually not have use for all these infrastructure that we are going to put in place. I mean, the event-driven infrastructure Of course, the roads become useful, the rails become useful, the airport expansion, building of new airports become useful. But then again, the sports link infrastructure that you're going to build, most of these games are not being had in Africa. Africans do not participate in these games. So what becomes of these structures that are put in place for these games? Again, there's also an angle about maintenance. I mean, it's also an evidence that in most host cities, post Olympic Games, some of these infrastructures are not being maintained. Even in 2016, just in Rio de Janeiro, there are a lot of infrastructure that have been left to rot because of lack of maintenance. And clearly that when you go across the continent, we have an issue with culture of maintenance. So if you're going to invest, this should be in this kind of infrastructure for Olympic Games. And thereafter, you do not have the use, I mean, in the everyday use for this infrastructure. Again, the cost of maintaining this infrastructure will also be a burden on the continent. So clearly, it could be a very disruptive to the real economic activities that need to go on. So for me, I think what I would say is that we need to look at ensuring that the basic infrastructure need that the continent requires to boost economic activities are put in place before an attempt is made on an Olympic Games of this scale. And I think that will save the continent a lot.
One of the incentives that people put forward in hosting, say, such Olympic Games is you increase your chances of winning, medals. But I don't think that would be the case in Africa because let's say South Africa decides to host the Olympic Games. They already have some stadiums, so they will have to still incur the enormous cost of other building other venues. But still, South Africa is not going to participate in 40, sporting events of the Olympic offers. It will probably be track and field, swimming, taekwondo, boxing, the traditional African, sports that we participate in. So the number of medals that South Africa will get, just for taking advantage of being the host, will still be minimal. So the main consideration should be, in the case of Africa, is the economics of hosting the Olympic Games. What are the economic benefits? And as Paul touched on, all those things, what do we get out of it? And is this beneficial for the masses? What will happen 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years after we have, put all this money into organizing the Olympic Games? How are we benefiting? That should be the main consideration for African countries.
And we'll bring you more from that discussion after the break. We'll also ask Ghanaians if they'd like to see the Olympics on home soil. We'll be back in a moment.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linoch Mudu, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Are we ready to host the Olympic Games? I think for sure. Do you know what it will do for our economy? It will boost the tourism sector. We get to see our favorite players, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Luka Doncic, Naomi Osaka, and all the rest. Trust me, it will boost the economy. It will help Ghana. It will put Ghana on the map. So are we ready? Well, if we prepare, we can host it.
Ghana is ready to host the Olympics Games because currently we have quite a vast infrastructure, looking at stadiums, swimming and gymnasium places in the various tertiary institutions. And as far as talent goes, we have quite a number of promising talents. If the recent Olympics is anything to go by, we made quite an impressive statement.
I think Ghana is ready to host the Olympics. It doesn't really take much. All we have to do is to prepare, because Ghana was able to host Cannes 2008. Ghana was able to host Cannes 2008. It's all about preparation. So for me as an artist, I think there's a lot happening in Ghana that if we are able to host the Olympics will be of great benefit to the country.
We are ready to host the Olympic Games. Why not? We have all the infrastructure. The Cape Coast Sports Stadium is ready. Baba Yara Sports Stadium is ready. Looking at the Accra Sports Stadium. If not that, and University of Ghana Sports Stadium. We are ready.
The people on the streets of Accra, they're telling us whether they think Ghana would be ready to host the Olympics and how they think it would benefit their country. And here's more now from my discussion with VOA's Mwamoyo Hamza and investment analyst Paul Frimpong. Gentlemen, we have Senegal preparing to host the 2026 Youth Olympics. Do you think that's going to be a sort of test run for African nations with hopes to host similar types of events? Are all eyes going to be on how Senegal fares in preparing and hosting those games? And which countries do you think would be well placed to think about putting in a bid to host a future Olympic Games? I mean, that's apart from the usual suspects like, South Africa, Egypt and Morocco.
Yes, sure. So obviously, with the IOC, like I said, the mandate of the IOC is to give the world the best of Olympic Games. And so what they do is that they scrutinize every bidder to make sure that the host cities that are bidding to host the Olympics can do better than the previous Olympics, which is what progress is. In the context of Africa, I still maintain that, of course, when you do the cost-benefit analysis in terms of how much a country or a city has to invest vis-a-vis the benefit thereof, it's a tough sell for me at this particular point. Obviously, we can look at other externalities which comes with hosting the game, which might not be in terms of monetary, in terms of investment and returns, but could be one of visibility and global presence, which could be one of the benefits that I would look at. I mean, the jobs will come, but they are mostly temporary. You might get tourism-related revenue as well. I mean, pre-games, during games, and post-games to some extent. Of course, it all depends on the political stability of these cities that are preparing to host the event. But I think for Africa, one of the areas that might be, for a reason for me, reasonable enough to want to say you want to bid for Olympic Games, will not be on the number side in terms of how much you invest in what you're going to recruit from, but it could be more of one of visibility and global presence, right? For the Youth Olympics, yes, it could be a test for Africa to show that it has a capacity to some extent to host an event on the scale. Of course, the scale of the Youth Olympics is not the same as the summer or the winter Olympics that we've been witnessing. But it could be that we can show the way that we have the capacity to some extent to be involved in Olympic Games, but at a later stage as we see more progress across multiple cities on the continent. The World Cup, yes, but it was only for a single sporting event, which is football or soccer. So obviously that could be not be the main leveler to say that the continent is ready to host an Olympics. Off my head, in terms of countries with cities that I believe might have the capacity outside of South Africa and Morocco, I would say Addis Ababa, I would say Kenya, Nairobi in Kenya, I would say Accra, Ghana, and purely this is based on the scale of the economic structures of these countries. Obviously, we always mention South Africa first because of the level of development that the country has and the capacity that it has. And when you look at the cities that are involved in hosting the Olympic Games, whether they're going to run at a loss or otherwise, you can see that in the medium to the long term, they have the capacity to repay these losses without any strain of economic difficulty falling on the citizenry. Okay, so they have economic system or structure that is developed to the level that they can be able to absorb the loss that will come out of hosting the Olympics for the medium to the long term. That might not be the case for most economies in Africa. When you look at the debt level of African countries now, most countries are above the threshold of sustainability. So we look at even Ghana that I mentioned, our debt to GDP ratio now is above 76%. And the standard or acceptable level for debt to GDP ratio is around 60%. So even Ghana, that is counted among one of the top 10 economies on the continent, is having a debt to GDP ratio hovering around 76, and it's estimated to go as high as 82% of GDP. And that can pose a huge economic danger if such economy is preparing to absorb or take on more debt as a result of wanting to host the Olympic Games. That will not be sustainable in the short to medium and even the long term. So for me, I think it's going to be very critical for us to look at, unless there's a strong case of visibility and global presence and showcasing the continent. I mean, having more voice geopolitically, that could be the convincing reason to want to host an Olympic Games. But based on the fact in terms of the numbers that are involved, it will not be sustainable for any country on the continent or city to want to host an Olympic Games now.
And Hamza, people are often sold the tourism logic, but do national pride and visibility pay dividends? Are there any long-term payoffs to speak of?
Absolutely, because sporting events, they are great motivators. And as Paul says, they bring visibility, they bring some opportunities, even if some of them are temporary. There's good incentive in organizing a sporting event. Now, single off sport like soccer or athletics, that's more amenable to African countries because it doesn't involve multiple events. But when you talk of multiple events, as we are talking in Olympics, and just as Paul said, besides South Africa, let's say Morocco, Ghana, Kenya, I would also mention Egypt, because Egypt can do two city hosting, Cairo and Alexandria city. Nigeria may have the money to go in, but you also have to factor in the Lagos traffic. Where are you gonna put the Lagos traffic on top of the Olympic traffic? So that could make the cost even more exorbitant. So there's so many factors here to consider. And as you said, we're not saying Africa cannot host the Olympics, but it will be a big major haul, exorbitant task to take.
Now, we've seen reporting in international media that fewer wealthier countries are actually now interested in hosting the Olympics. They just don't want to deal with the economic headache, with all that overspending and the waste. And of course, the controversies that seem to come with every Olympic Games. And if you add on top of that, in the last half century, every Olympic Games has gone over budget. Hamza, does this in your mind spell the beginning of the end for the Olympic Games? I mean, as an institution, or do you think it actually creates more space and opportunities for other countries, less wealthy countries, especially those in Africa, to get in on the game? Excuse the pun.
I don't think it's the end of the Olympics. The Olympics will keep going on. I mean, it's such a magnificent event that the world waits for every 4 years. It's going to go on. People will find a way to host the Olympic Games, and the games will go. And I mean, in sports, in Olympics, you get to expose different kind of sporting events. You show the heart of the champion, the heart of participating in such a major events. It's such a good thing for human beings. So the Olympics will keep on going. I think if I were to advise the African countries in terms of the Olympics, is expand the games, the number of games that you are participating in. Don't just do the traditional track and field, boxing, swimming, boxing, taekwondo, and go into skating, go into cycling, go into diving, go into equestrian, go, whatever is within the means of African nations. We should expand, the number of events that we're participating. That will give, young people more chances of going to the Olympics than it does now. Now it's very limited. Even when we go, say for Kenya, they go and they get, good results. All the medals Kenya got, they got them from track and field, nothing else. Kenya is a good boxing country. So is Ghana. So is Nigeria. I mean, they should also invest on how to have success in those games, because Ghana, they just won their a bronze medal in boxing in Tokyo, and the last time they did that was 1964. Yeah. So, Paul, can you explain that?
Yeah, true. I mean, it was historic. I mean, it was all over in the media in Ghana that we've had to wait for this long to get a medal at the Olympics, and that's also it was a bronze medal actually. So for us, it's a bit historic, and it means that the last time Ghana had a medal at the Olympics, I wasn't born then. So you can imagine what it means for us. So I think you're right. And for me, I think in future, in terms of the Olympics, on the face of the cost-benefit analysis, the Olympics will not stop. But I think in future, it's going to be lean towards a limited traditional host, which will just be rotating amongst themselves. I think that could be the possible future of the Olympics. Cities are going to bid every now and then to want to host, but the trend will fall on the fact that it's going to be rotating amongst countries or cities that have already hosted the Olympics in the past. So it already started unfolding now. So we have the US that will host, I think, the fourth or so Olympic Games in LA in 2036 or so, 2032. You have Paris that will be hosting in 2026, which is going to be the third time or so. So I'm sure the trend is going to follow in that state, because for new hosts, the cost involved, the scale of it and the cost involved, I think is very daunting if you do not have a strong economic underpinnings to support these kind of investments. In the medium to long term, it will be too much to bear going forward. So I think that is how I see the future of the Olympics going to be.
Mwamoyo Hamza, Acting Managing Editor of VOA's African News Division, and Paul Frimpong, Economic and Investment Analyst. Gentlemen, great insights. Great to have you with me. I do appreciate your time. Now, we also asked you on social media if you think your country would be ready to host the Olympics. Crispus Rehayo says even if we are not ready, Uganda should be considered to host these beautiful games. Festus Asino is optimistic in Southern Africa and says Namibia is ready. Barinabu Bless says not in Africa. Maybe Arab Africans are ready, but not us. The last time the big event came to South Africa, it left a lot of people in debt because of too much corruption. And thank you for sharing your comments with us on social media. It's always great to hear what you think about the issues we cover. Still ahead here on Straight Talk Africa. From Egypt's Mohamed Salah and Liberia's George Weah to South Africa's Nelson Mandela and Cote d'Ivoire's Didier Drogba. What happens when the worlds of politics and sports collide? Also, Olympic silver medalist Abdi Nageeye tells us what was behind that incredible moment of sportsmanship at the Tokyo Olympics. Stay with us. We'll be right back. You're with Straight Talk Africa. Welcome back. It's been said that when athletes speak, people listen. And Africa has long produced world-famous athletes whose influence transcends culture, religion, and politics in their home countries. The continent has also produced examples of how sports itself can unite people in a way little else does. Radwa Saad is a researcher with the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University here in the United States. She says African nations should take greater advantage of the power of sports to bridge divides in society. I asked Rad about the connection between sports and politics and what the one could do for a country that the other might not.
And when we think about places where, people from different backgrounds are coming together, groups that normally wouldn't interact with each other or would otherwise have antagonistic relationships, spaces where leaders tend to emerge, where influential role models tend to emerge, then definitely I think it becomes critical to take seriously the role of sports. Because in a continent like Africa, sports is very much, is becoming more and more an avenue where people are beginning to articulate demands, needs, and aspirations. There's always been a tendency to focus on how sports has influenced relations between states, kind of through soft power, through sports diplomacy. But in the African context, in many other contexts across the world, where we know that the state is more or less lacking in legitimacy, where there may be very little avenues where people can express themselves, mobilize politically, where people don't feel like the leaders or the rulers are in any way representative of them, then, these conversations, which are political in nature, are being shifted into avenues or platforms where people are playing sports. And I think a part of this is because it is perceived as an apolitical space, but it is an apolitical space where political conversations, important political conversations, are happening.
And Radwa, in the research work that you've done around this, you mentioned these examples of where the worlds of politics and sport have collided, with Côte d'Ivoire's Didier Drogba after a match pleading with warring factions to put their weapons down, and Mohamed Salah emerging as a favorite in an election in Egypt.
In the last elections in Egypt, we had Abdi al-Sisi running against the candidate which nobody knew. The elections were more or less kind of seen as not free, not legitimate, not fair. But in a very serendipitous, spontaneous act of protest that was completely uncoordinated, over 1 million Egyptians showed up to the polls, crossed out the names of both candidates, and wrote Mohamed Salah. And in the results that came out, it was actually shown that Mohamed Salah became the surprise runner-up. So he actually got more votes than the opposition, right? Now, some people can say, oh, this is just a joke. Mohamed Salah is not going to run for president, even though it has happened in Liberia, where George Weah, people also said he wouldn't run for president. There's no way he'd ever be qualified enough. And then he actually went back to school to get his qualifications and ended up running for president and ended up winning, right? Mohamed Salah in particular, who has become a very, very unifying figure, arguably much more popular than the president himself. People are saying these are the kind of leaders, these are the kind of figures that we feel represent us. And, what's interesting about Mohamed Salah in particular is that his influence just cuts across, transcends completely issues of class, religion, ethnicity. He's seen as sort of embodying a particular practice of Islam that's moderate, which most Egyptians kind of feel like they're always kind of caught in between this. You're either authoritarian, an elite capturing the state, or you're an Islamist, right? And he's saying, no, I represent a very moderate version of Islam. I come from a very modest background. I demonstrate a certain mastery and discipline in my craft, and these kind of values that people really, really hold dear. And I think this is the reason why his influence is able to resonate so widely across all these different divides.
At the end of the day, we all know that politics is about the allocation of resources, about forming a government, governing a country, and managing the country's affairs. Why is it that people would look to a figure from the world of sports, which is really about athleticism? It's about individual physicality and celebrity as a potential solution to their political and socioeconomic problems?
Right. I think this is it's a great question because, I think at times we do tend to sort of maybe over-romanticize the influence of sports, right? We have to keep in mind that there are limitations. And in the same way that sports can be used to bridge divides, it can also be used, to spark violence. It can also be used to exasperate divides, right? And we see that, for instance, in the 2009 World Cup qualifying match between Egypt and Algeria, where Algerians literally had to be flown out of Egypt in helicopters because the violence got so bad. These spaces are places where there's very intense emotion and passion, and if not channeled properly, this could lead also to negative outcomes. It's not always positive. And even sort of the notable examples that we're talking about now, which are beautiful, of course, when they happen, you know, Nelson Mandela kind of using rugby as a way to unify the nation. Of course, you know, there's been many problems after that, and much criticism about this not really doing much to tackle the underlying economic disparities between blacks and whites in South Africa. The same thing can be said about the influence of Didar Drogba ending the civil war in Ivory Coast. I mean, the country did descend back into a civil war a couple of years after, right? So even though his efforts did bear fruit, again, it was for a very limited period of time. Football, sports in general, can be used as a platform for peace building, but we also have to be very careful of how that's being done and what kind of messages are being disseminated. And I think we also have to keep in mind that, again, its power lies in the fact that it is perceived as an apolitical space. So if we turn to it as a space where politics can emerge, where, you know, where government can influence the state of political affairs, can spread its propaganda, you know, through using these sports platforms, then it becomes co-opted. It loses its, you know, its power to appeal to a large group of people in the same way that it is now. It must remain, at least in theory, a neutral space, right? Free of government hijacking, you know, free of the government co-opting it, in order for it to really be influential. At the end of the day, we do need, you know, what's going to actually produce profound change is the mobilization, right? Is the formal political avenues which people are becoming more or less sort of disenfranchised with, you know, see very little hope in. And it is really that work that needs to be done on the ground. Football can help, you know, it can spread messages, it can produce small acts or gestures that, you know, that can aid these processes, but it can never be, you know, the one thing that's going to transform the state of our politics. It just cannot.
And that was researcher Radwa Saad speaking to me here in the United States. Now to an unforgettable moment of friendship on the final day of the Tokyo Olympics. It happened between these two men, Abdi Nageeye of the Netherlands and Bashir Abdi from Belgium. Both were born in Somalia and left the country at a young age. Locked in a three-way race for silver and bronze medals during the men's marathon, Nageeye suddenly slowed down and urged his struggling friend and competitor to overcome a leg cramp and beat Kenyan rival Lawrence Cherono in the final sprint to the finish line. Nageeye told me why he took this risk. Here he is, unfiltered and in his own words.
I came to the Netherlands, I think in 1996 as a refugee. Everyone knows what was going on at that time in Somalia, unfortunately. I grew up here. Unfortunately, I went with my brother to Syria, then back to Somalia, and then I came back to the Netherlands. I thought this is the best country I want to stay and study and work later. That was 2005. So I was been away 6 years from the Netherlands. And I started running here. I was playing soccer for a long time, and just actually, you can say it by accident, I started running. And the first race actually, or the first run touched me. And I really like the freedom, what you feel when you are just running alone in the forests, on the streets. And after a couple of years, it became my profession. And I went to Kenya, I went to Ethiopia to improve myself. And it was a long journey. It was a long journey, 14 years, I think now, that I was running. And it was my first success. My first Olympics was 5 years ago, 2016, also the marathon. And that time it was, wow, I can go to the Olympics. But this time I had different nerve because this time I knew I want to compete with the best. It's not only to go there and to join, but this time I want to come back with results. Bashir Abdi is really my long friend. And, you know, we had the background of becoming from Somalia, playing football, but also that background of we have to go to Kenya, we have to go to Ethiopia to train with the best because they are the best in the long distance. And I had many Dutch friends here, Dutch athletes, we were training together, and they were not going 100% for their goal. They were thinking about, yeah, I need a job later, I need a car, I need this. And me, I was going 100% for my athletics. Material was not important for me. And Bashir had the same, 2 hours away from where I live in Holland. He had the same dream. I was competing the marathon distance, and the marathon happens always the last day. It's always Sunday morning. Most of the other races, other competitions are finished. If it's swimming, basketball, judo, everything is finished. The marathon, have so much respect. It's the last day. We are there at the start line. And the race was going good. I was prepared well for the heat and for the hot conditions. My fitness was also good. Bashir Abdi, who was now number 3, we are teammates since 5 months and long friends since 2008 when I started running. And at 39 kilometers, until that time, I would see him as one of my competitors that he can beat me. He was better than me in training. But also we had a very tough Kenyan athlete who was the winner of Boston Marathon and Chicago Marathon, who have incredible achievements. So at 39, I wanted to make my move. And I looked where everyone was. So I looked at my left side, I remember, and Cherono was there in the Spaniard, the Spanish guy. And I looked, where is Bashir? Because I was also afraid of him. So I looked, and then I see Bashir is not with us, or let's say he's not close to us. He's 10 meter or 12 meter. So I was telling him, come close. And it started that moment. So I waved to him. And that thing is very common thing for us. When in the trainings, when you have tough day, we will tell you, come close. And it helps you just stay close, because when you have a bigger gap, you will lose and you can run alone. So it happened again at 41, but still I want to go for my success. Still I want to go. But every time when I want to go, I see my friend and my teammate still hurting. So it was feeling like I'm leaving him alone behind there. So I still waited at 41, because I'm thinking Cherono have incredible speed. He's the last winner of Boston Marathon, and he had the best speed when he was beating the former world champion, actually the current world champion. He beat that race. So I was still thinking I need to have longer sprint, not short sprint. He will beat me in short sprint. I need longer sprint. So still I want to go, but Bashir is still there hurting and giving every time 5 meters, 6 meters. And then actually that time I let it go to have long sprint, and I said, I feel great. I was feeling still great. I said, Abdi, I had a lot of confidence. You can beat him in short sprint. So the last 3K, I was actually, I had confidence that I will be number 2, but I knew if we go, Bashir will not able to go with us. And I remember the 400 meter, I said, normally I always go 400 meter. I can have long sprint again. Still, I waited 200 meter. And then you can see I'm actually I'm trying to hide that Cherono will not see me, that I'm putting now the sprint. So I wanted to surprise him with the sprint. So actually I'm still telling Bashir to come, but I never hide it, because when I see the videos, I'm just doing like very aggressive way. But that moment I was thinking, I do it secretly. I'm telling Bashir, now we have to go up. Bashir, I'm going now. You have to come with me. And I still waited, and you can see, from your side, you can see if someone is now next to you. And you can see actually when he's next to me, then I put my last sprint. It was crazy and we had interviewed together last time, and he said, if Cherono made any move from 39 until 150, 200 meters to go, I was not able to go because he had cramp. And with cramp, you can't sprint for long. You can sprint only for 6-7 seconds. That's it. And it was perfect scenario for him to make safe his bronze medal. And for Cherono, he didn't make the right choice, but it was like we were actually sent for Bashir actually to make sure that he will win the bronze medal. And after the finish, Eliud Kipchoge is my same sponsor, same manager for many years. I trained with him last 4 months. It was crazy that everything happened so good. And after 2 days, actually, I realized how special it was. It was amazing to finish like that. It means a lot. It was first time ever in that 14 years that my mother called me and told the neighbors came running to the house and telling her about my success. So it is everywhere now. My little brother who's in Canada, he was calling me and he said, do you have TikTok because you are going viral? I said, no, I don't have it, but everyone knows about it, and especially what I did for my friend and former countryman. Yeah, it means a lot, and I hope that I can give the same as someone like Halima, who do model in Canada, and Ilhan in the US, Ken An, who is singer, Mo Farah, who is a sir now and double Olympic champion, to give the Somali people that even if we are here, you can still have success, and that they have examples, someone who look like them, who have the same language and religion, that they can say, yeah, actually we can do something. My message to every Somali young girl or boy, or even to every African young boys and girls, is especially the ones who are in, first I have to start the one who are in Europe and in America and in Canada. You have a chance. Even if your mother don't support you, tell him, put me in sport. And let your parents follow you when you are Saturday morning, you have training or you have a race. Let them drive you. Just tell them, I need you to come with me. The other people have their parents with them, and many Somalis they don't support their kids with sport. They just think, oh, school is enough, that's it. But sport gives you a lot of discipline. It's health for your body. It gives that discipline to work something, to have goal fully, and don't see each other directly as competitors. When you help each other as a team, you will grow, and the race that you will see, you will win. But before that, before the finish line, you have to help each other.
Olympian Abdi Nageeye there. And there were other memorable moments from the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Africa's athletes brought home 37 medals in total. Kenya and Uganda won the most gold medals, 6 in total. Jackson Mvunganye has the details.
Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge made history as only the third man to win gold medals in back-to-back games, while Faith Kipyegon set a new Olympic record with a gold for women's in 1500 meters. Uganda's Peruth Chemtai became the first Ugandan woman to win a gold medal in any sport with her victory in the women's 3,000-meter steeplechase. And Joshua Cheptegei won the men's 500-meter, scoring his second medal for the tournament. Christine Mboma came in through with the women's 200 final, making her Namibia's first female athlete to win a silver medal at the Games. Burkina Faso triple jumper Hugh Fabrice Zango's disappointing first 2 jumps in the final in Tokyo left his family watching live at home in Ouagadougou, stressed and fearful that he could miss out on a medal, his country's first ever at the Olympics. Arguing him on from their sofa, Zango's father, brother and sisters erupted in joy when he leapt 17.47 meters on his third run, propelling him briefly into second place behind Portugal's Pedro Picado. Zango's father, Jacques, was overwhelmed in a good way as he hugged his wife, who was so nervous she chose not to watch the event.
It's an immense joy because we experience it live, with the thrill and, in the end, victory. It's really an immense joy for us, parents, but also for the people of Burkina Faso. We are very proud.
Zango won his bronze medal, the first for the West African nation since it began participating in the Olympics in 1972 on Burkina Faso's Independence Day. Fabrice Zango told Reuters in Tokyo that he had been looking to do better than bronze, but said that he was proud to win Burkina Faso's first Olympic medal on such a significant day.
Well, many of those athletes returned home to a hero's welcome following their Olympic accomplishments. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni handed out cash and luxury cars to his country's medal winners. Botswana's government rewarded each of their 4 Olympic medal winners with a 2-bedroom house. So, of course, if you want that, become an Olympian and then move to Botswana. Our very best wishes to every African athlete competing now in the Paralympics in Tokyo later this month. We'll be watching and rooting for you. Thank you so much for being with me this week, whether you are tuning in from across Africa or other parts of the world. Thank you for always watching and always listening. Until next time, goodbye.